And lo, there appeared a new star in the east. That wise man, Josh Bersin, says he's seen a new learning product that's going to change the world. Want to hear from the company that built it? Here comes Summer. Welcome to The Learning Hack, a podcast about the people and technologies that are creating the future of learning. I'm John Hellman.
Now guess what? Learning is cool. Learning is cool. Learning is cool.
The return of in-person events recently has meant that after sitting in this darkened room for 2 years, I can at last go out there amongst you and get your feedback face to face. And you say lovely stuff. Thank you very much. But I've also learned that people consume the podcast while doing other things, multitasking, and some of those other things aren't quite what you'd expect. Okay, listening while commuting, walking the dog, doing the washing up, you'd expect that. But what about this?
It would be such fun.
Perhaps I should explain what's going on here. Sarah Ratcliffe from Seagoss UK told me she plays the podcast to her ponies, who seem to get exceptionally filthy, there's a lot of mud in the English countryside, to calm them while they're being cleansed. And she sent us the video to prove it. So this set us thinking. Because this is the last episode before the Christmas break. And here at The Learning Hack, we love a seasonal competition. That's a fact. Hack facts.
Yes, we're offering a free bottle of champagne to the person who comes up with the most unusual activity that they pursue while listening to our podcasts. Photographic or video evidence must be supplied. And, learning people, please keep it clean. Send your photos or videos to me on this address, kate@learninghackpodcast.com.
Winner will be announced on the first episode of next season. Now, to bring this season to an end, we have a fantastic guest for you. Kate Fitzgerald, Head of Fact, and now Head of Seasonal Competitions too, it seems. Tell us about her.
Summer Rivers Salomonsen is VP Content Product at Cornerstone On Demand, where her role is to architect powerful learning and content strategies to improve the work experience of the company's 75 million global user base. She was previously Chief Learning Officer with Grovo and has a 14-year career in L&D, having gained an Ed.D. from University of Southern California.
So, what did we talk about? Jay Curtis, Head of Themes. Fill us in.
John, I listened to the podcast while compiling my list of themes. Can I have that bottle of champagne now?
Staff can't enter the competition, Jay. Just give us the themes.
The big story is Cornerstone's new product launch, Xplor, and that led you into a multi-threaded discussion of how learning systems are evolving with regards to learning science, talent management, and the great skills debate. You also talked quite a bit about the role of content within a large learning system like Xplor, given someone's content background, and microlearning in particular.
In Bersin's analysis, Xplor brings together the categories of LXP, Talent Marketplace, Skills Engine and LMS. It's big, so big that it looks a little like what we used to call a Deathstar system. But is that what organisations really need right now? Is that what learners need? So welcome to the podcast, Summer Rivers Salomonsen, marvellous name. Could you describe your role at Cornerstone and how your career in learning has led up to this moment, from studying literature early on and an early job as a grant writer for a medical services non-profit to being a VP in a global tech company valued at 5 billion quid? Must have been quite a journey.
I love how you put that, John. It sounds very it makes me sound very cool. Let's see. Yeah, I started my career in English literature. All I ever wanted to do was teach high school, English and Spanish education. That's what I wanted to do. And I realized from an early age that studying the stories of the greats, the great authors, the great characters, gave me an insight into people that was important. And that ability to read something, write something, and tell the story of someone's journey was something that would probably translate well into my career. So leaving education a few years in, I moved into grant writing as you mentioned, got into training, corporate training from that. But I feel like the line from this, the through line from the beginning till now, has always been about looking for the right data points, amplifying those moments, and piecing together that story in a provocative way.
Interesting. And so you find your kind of storytelling ability is employed at the moment in your role at Cornerstone?
Absolutely. I mean, when you say, VP of content product at a global tech company, there's so much that goes into that. But I think my passion is about how people learn, how we can simplify that process in the workplace, and how content at its core is the catalyst of that interaction. So in my role now at Cornerstone, all of our go-to-market content products roll up through me. I oversee our partnerships team, our in-house created content through Cornerstone Studios, quality, curation, all of these engines that work to produce what I believe is both industry-leading and industry-defining content, because that's where it's at. That's where the next generation of learning is going to come from.
The big story you have to tell at the moment, of course, is Xplor. Now, we don't, as a rule, go in for product push on this podcast editorially, not even for the sponsors, I have to say. But Josh Bersin, for one, thinks this is a significant development, and he calls it a new skills-based AI-powered platform designed as an LXP, talent, ability, career, and skills platform, with the potential to change the L&D landscape. So that's a pretty big claim from an important analyst. Can you tell us what it is, what it does, and what it does that other systems don't do?
Yeah, that's quite a statement, right? I mean, and high praise indeed. Thank you, Josh Bersin. You've been around a long time. You've seen a lot of different platforms. To me, Cornerstone Xplor is the realized vision of everything we've wanted for our people in the workplace. And that's part of the reason, John, I am thrilled to be driving the content product that aligns with it. So at its core, Cornerstone Xplor gives us kind of a new system of work. It links together the skills we have, the skills we want to achieve, the content that drives those skills, and the goal, apologies, you hear my chihuahua out there, and the goal of that career development or that career momentum that comes with it. It is that unified system of work. You know as well as I do, John, that historically in this industry, we've attacked these problems with a lot of different tools and a lot of different systems. And you go here to do this piece, and you go here to do this piece. Xplor is that ultimate challenge of how can we link the development, how can we link the skills acquisition, and how can we link the career mobility together in a unified system. And again, that looks great as a bullet point, on a slide deck, but is infinitely harder to achieve in actuality.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is the proposition of the suite, isn't it? It's a one-stop shop. You've got everything that you need. Everything talks to each other. The counter to that, and somebody who's marketed learning systems before, the usual counter to that is, it's not, all the individual bits aren't best of breed. So your learning management system might not be as excellent as one from another provider who purely focuses on doing that piece. And similarly with kind of curation, skills taxonomy, all the rest of those bits. How do you answer that aggressive, opposing marketing person who says that?
Yeah, that best of breed phrase is very provocative, isn't it? I think we've stayed too long in that place and believed too long that I have to get this person's expert product to do this thing expertly in my organization. What I love about Xplor is it says we take components of this thing and we are making something better by putting it together. We are defining that industry by uniting content, learning, skills, and career together. And that in itself creates a new market. It almost creates a new platform. I think our learners, and forgive me, I see our employees as learners because I'm a learning practitioner, but our employees have had it up to here. with saying, I have to go to 17 different places to get this thing done. I just want to get better at work. How can I do that? And that requires a new system. So the proof will be in the pudding. That's one of my favorite phrases. The proof will show as we bear this out, as we roll it out to new customers, and as we see their success. But I would wager by lowering that threshold to engagement, by saying we've put it all together for you in a very user-forward, consumer-friendly way, we will see the results that we want to see.
The other counter, of course, is that you buy this wacky great suite. It's got a load of stuff in it you probably didn't realize you needed. And you'll probably end up not using all of that functionality. There was always a thing in kind of mobile phone sales that people would say, well, actually, people only use about 10% of the functionality. And that sort of felt to be the same with big suites, that they don't actually get round to using half of it.
That's possible. I see Xplor as smart functionality, though. I mean, look, as we look at like the history of the LMS, right? Going back however many decades, 20 plus years, it was always envisioned as kind of a tracking mechanism, right? How do we keep track of all the things our people are supposed to be taking and supposed to be learning? And then it morphed from that kind of training focus. I mean, that was one of my very first corporate HR jobs, right? Training administrator. It morphed from top down to suddenly we're trying to think about learner first and user generated. And that's when the LXP was born. And we started thinking about learning and development instead of training and development. When I think about all of that functionality, my fundamental belief, John, is that we over-architect almost everything in the HR space. As practitioners, as HR admins, as leaders, we make things far too complex. And we think about all the bells and whistles that we might want as admins and as leaders. When I look at Xplor, I see a product that was built as the inverse of, as a learner, what makes sense to me coming into this platform? Why might I click for the first time? And what's going to make me click again? And look, with any type of smart product development, you're going to go through revs, you're going to make smart decisions. But this was built from that very clear place of how can we unify all these systems to make it appealing to a learner, as opposed to what is the infinite universe of things our admins want, and how can we shove that into a product?
So UX driven rather than features driven.
And I mean, in our industry, that's amazing in itself, right? So much is features driven.
I worked for a tech company. This is skeletons in my closet, as you say. I worked for a tech company that sold talent software. In fact, one of the companies that was acquired by Cornerstone via Saba. And it felt to me at the time like the learning business and the talent business were quite distinct from each other. We had our own language to a degree. We got on very well, and I think you've got colleagues there who are in that organization. Got on very well, but they had their own marketing team, and kind of the client list was different for the learning business as it was to the talent business, and so on. So it felt they were quite distinct from each other. To what extent do you think the future of learning tech lies in an ever closer integration of those two worlds, the worlds of learning, particularly in the worlds of talent? Or are there essential differences that need to be respected as you move forward, developing new systems?
That's a great conversation starter. I think you're right. I think talent and learning historically have kind of been two dialects of the same core language. And yet we've spent more of our time architecting barriers between those two functions when we should have been identifying synergies between those two functions. And I think for my part, working my formative years in HR and L&D were in a healthcare company. And what I saw more than I wanted to was individuals in talent, individuals in learning, kind of architecting their own reason for being as opposed to finding connectivity between the two groups that could propel the entire industry forward. And where I sit now in a tech company as a VP of content product and the head of studios and essentially driving that learning strategy, I am by default in a position of saying, hey guys, we have more in common than we think. You want people to grow and develop and achieve and build resilience. And I am literally architecting and building the solutions that can catalyze that opportunity. How can we build those systems together as opposed to seeing them as discrete just for our sole purposes of creating my space at this table or my opportunity to be in this conversation? I think there is tremendous momentum now as we look at ed tech, for example, which 10 years ago wasn't even a thing. I often get asked, like, how did you end up a CLO of an ed tech company when I was at Grofo? And I'm like, that wasn't a thing when I graduated college. There's no chief learning officers, let alone of ed tech companies. But that fusion of education and tech came somewhat readily because we needed the medium and we needed the platform. Perhaps, John, and maybe we can dream big here, talent and learning are that next symbiotic relationship for people. Mm-hmm. It's not just systems, but for our people.
Okay, so perhaps what we're saying here is that if you're UX driven rather than being kind of admin driven, the effect of that is that you've got one employee who's doing both the learning and the talent and has the talent. Perhaps you need a bit of kind of collapsing or dissolving of silos to make that work. And is that an inevitable result, do you think, of being user experience driven?
I'd say it's inevitable. I think we'll be more successful if we acknowledge it deliberately and make smart decisions about it. I see a workplace that has very little tolerance now for redundancy or duplicated efforts. And look, maybe this is because I am a learning practitioner and I'm passionate about learning, and I am a behavioralist in the sense that if I don't see change in behavior, I would question whether learning really happened, especially in the workplace. But that is the goal of talent, right? To see behavior development, to see growth, to see opportunity realized. Learning drives all of that. Let's work together.
So let's focus on the skills issue for a little bit. This is a really marked trend in the market recently. Stacks of blogs about it. But I've heard it treated with a bit of cynicism in certain quarters by guests on the podcast and other conversations I've had. They say that skills taxonomies won't work. We never managed to lick that problem with competencies, so we're now just calling it something else and tilting at the same windmill. Another thing that I've heard is that despite a perceived need to help people transition from one job role to another, I think it was Craig Weiss said this, we don't actually see that happening in organizations. Mm-hmm. Now, he's a lot closer to that than I am. So, I'm in no kind of position to assess whether that's true or not. Perhaps you've got your own views on it. On that. What could you say to convince cynics that this is truly the right direction to go in? Because it's very much a part of the story that you're telling about Xplor, and not just a temporary phenomenon to do with the pandemic.
I would love to know, John. I mean, I definitely have opinions. When you think about what the critics or cynics are saying about skills, what are they saying? Why are they dissatisfied with this as a kind of new architecture for where we need to go in the workplace?
I think with the skills thing, and I should say I asked the questions, but I think with the skills things, taxonomies, I think there's a kind of suspicion that people are waving the term AI around. And that will make people think that the difficulties they've got with kind of moving employees from one job to another will go away if you wave this magic wand at them. But there's a lot of devil in the detail with that. And I think competencies, trying to run systems on competency matrices or matrices gave people a lot of problems. And I think there's a feeling among those cynics that problem persists.
I think that's fair. I've never been one for catch-all words to determine either our course of action or the state that we're in right now. I was never a fan of competencies. To me, they felt more subjective, and they felt more distinct organization to organization, and they felt almost impossible to either develop or to document. And it felt very much like this kind of clarion call of, we're going to be better as a company because we've made these competency matrix. However, we can't really determine when our people follow that. And we're not sure what that's going to look like. Skills, to me, feels like a smarter way to look at the world of development and to look at the world of performance driven by content, and to build on the foundation that we've already made, which is building smart subject taxonomies and tagging content in ways that goes beyond just title and description, but identifies outcomes and identifies behaviors associated with that content, with the goal of that content. Skills, to me, feels more objective, and it feels like it is keeping pace with where our workplaces are heading. I can only imagine the number of conversations you've had over the last 18 months with digital transformation realized and massive disruption and organizations changing and all this kind of stuff. But at the core of it is, what are the skills my people need to have and to demonstrate in the face of all of that? And a skills taxonomy in Xplor is closely linked and aligned to our subject taxonomy of our content. So we can find synergy and overlap and help people realize it in a more personal way than something like competencies, which just feels different to me.
Okay, so skills is a different thing from competencies.
Yes.
The way we work has changed, and the way we learn is changing too. But 70% of organisations don't feel that their learning systems can really cope with all this change. It seems there is a disconnect between what learners need right now and what most learning suites provide. In a new white paper, Ben Betts and I tell the story of how this disconnect happened and lay out a vision for what a modern learning system ought to be and do. It's called Sweet Dreams, and you can read it now.
Meet the evolving nature of work with Cornerstone Xplor, a holistic people growth experience that delivers a fully integrated, personalised journey of learning, skill development and career mobility for every person. I'd share all the ways Cornerstone Xplor is designed and personalised for the ways your people want to grow and work, but this is only a 30-second ad. To learn how you can unite people growth with business success, visit csod.info/future-ready. At your previous company, Grovo, you were involved with microlearning. Like almost everything in learning, it went through a height curve from being the word on everybody's lips to coming in for a bit of a bashing. It's terrible. I feel terrible about having to report to you about all this, how everything that people say gets bashed, but unfortunately it's true, this market. How do you see microlearning now within the context of a suite like Xplor? Is it still relevant? Is it holding its place, do you think, as an important facet of content?
Yeah, microlearning, God, that really had its heyday, didn't it? When I joined Grovo, the company was going through a time of repositioning, reorganization, and I joined an entirely new executive team that was focused on how do we identify what is valuable here and make a grand end to this company. Of course, it ended in acquisition by Cornerstone, and the rest is history. But a big part of that initial challenge was we need to define this thing. I have zero tolerance for jazz hands in this industry. I see so many peaks of that and sparks of the new word, of the new term, which is why I think people meet these things with rightful suspicion. But for me, microlearning became this kind of forcing function and the opposite of everything we had done in this industry to over-architect learning. And it came this call back to simple yet powerful. So to us, we had a three-part definition. to focus on microlearning. One is mixed media. All right. All the research bears out that we learn best when we're given a single type of idea in different types of mediums, right? It builds our curiosity, our delight, et cetera, et cetera. Single concept was the core of microlearning. So much learning that happens in the workplace, especially content that's developed in-house, has way too many things going on. And a lot of that's for reasons that have nothing to do with learning design. It has to do with budgetary constraints or political motives or all this type of thing that happens in the workplace. We rarely give our people an opportunity to focus on one outcome, one subject. But the third, more elusive element of microlearning that was always hard to nail for us was entirely platform dependent. And that was delivered in the flow of work. And of course, we credit Josh Bersin with the in the flow phrase, which everyone uses now. But the idea being directionally, learning has to be a part of my day. And the tech has always lagged behind this vision or this call to action for learning. When I look at something like microlearning in that framework, mixed media, single topic in the flow, I see so many examples of that. So Cornerstone Content Anytime is our primary learning subscription. Okay, it's meant to model kind of a consumer facing, think of it as like premium workplace learning subscriptions. We have over 170 partners. So many of them have adopted that call back to a single topic for a single lesson. So short is not always the right word. I think people lost their way with, videos less than 2 minutes and more powerful. Nonsense. It's the size of the idea, not of the lesson. And that's one of those elements that microlearning will be enduring because we need that break, John. We need that opportunity to look at one thing at a time, clear our brain, and apply that. So that's what I like about microlearning, though we don't talk about it that much anymore.
Yeah, not so much, I think. But we do talk an awful lot about workflow learning, as you say, and people who write a lot in that field, such as Bob Mosher, who we had on the podcast, Nick Shackleton-Jones, tend to make a bit of a distinction between stuff which is learning and stuff which is really resources that you access at need within the moment. Is that a part of your content strategy within Xplor?
Absolutely. I love Bob Mosher's stuff. Bob, if you're listening, I'm a big fan. Yes, there is a big difference between a microlearning lesson that's meant to drive a behavior change and something that is built in that construct of microlearning, but that's meant as an aid, meant to parallel the 5 moments of need. I know Bob does a lot of work on that. We build both. So my team, Cornerstone Studios, still builds Grovo content with the framework we developed at Grovo. We produce it on a 6-week clip. It's super speedy. Think of it as kind of high quality basics. But with every Grovo program we produce, we also create what we call activation material that goes alongside it, based on that premise of, as a frontline manager, when I assign this program to my team, or when I recommend it to them, or when they've taken it, let's say unconscious bias, for example, which blew up over the last 2 years and is like our number one consumed course in our entire ecosystem, we wanted to put in the hands of frontline managers, even of ICs and admins, a tool to kind of keep that context going. So it's not a job aid. It's a way to integrate that learning into the day-to-day functions of my team. Maybe there's some talking points for my next one-on-ones. Maybe there's some questions I want to include in an all hands. Maybe there's an activity that we might do as a team after we've completed the learning. It's not like a full-blown learner guide in that like cumbersome way, just more of a work-friendly activation material. How can I extend the life of this content beyond just the consumption window?
So while we're on the subject of content, which is very much kind of your origins and where you're coming from, I made an observation in a white paper I wrote a while ago that historically a lot of learning design and knowledge of pedagogy from very knowledgeable people such as yourself went into the content, i.e. e-learning modules in those days, and not much into the design of learning systems. So your LMS was mostly about administrative efficiency, not an awful lot of kind of pedagogy yet. We've seen that
that situation change, obviously, with the introduction of LXPs, and we now have learning paths and so on. But as someone from a content background with a knowledge of learning theory, now in a large systems company, I'd like to ask how you see that question in terms of, are we now at a place where we are applying learning science to the design of systems and that transition is over, or is it a journey that we're still on?
We're still on that journey. That question, John, I would say that's kind of the tagline of my career. How can I bring to bear the veracity, the importance, and the integrity of learning theory and learning strategies to the systems that we engage with day in, day out? So when I first joined Cornerstone, which was 3 years ago now when they acquired Grovo, and I brought with me my content creation team, 90% of which are still with me at Cornerstone. This is a focused, dedicated team. One of the taglines I used to convince leadership about the need for greater synergy between the content org and the product org was, content will either be magnified or muted by the platform that deploys it. And it was that magnified or muted to bring to bear, we can create all the fantastic binge-worthy content you could dream of, but ultimately, our learners are going to experience it and consume it in some type of platform. So what do we need to do to bridge that divide? In the old days, if it takes 17 clicks to get to the content, it does not matter how good it is. We all know this. They're going to be long gone. But now, how can we signpost? How can we create that experience to be not only more intuitive, but more content forward, more learning forward? How can we kind of tap into what we know is real about who we are as humans and what makes us natural learners, and strip away some of that unnecessary architecture that we build up in the workplace? So I think, to your question, I think we'll always be on this journey, though I look around now and I think my greatest collaborators in my space outside of my team is from our product org and our engineering org, because we've recognized expertise on both sides and we're building together instead of having learning and development and content as an afterthought. It's a combined process.
I suppose the difficulty in that question, or one of the difficulties, but a pretty core one, is that if you look at the scientific literature, what it tells you is that really the learning actually happens after the event or the content consumption is over, when you actively recall that stuff and practice it. And it's something that we've not necessarily been seeing in learning systems, is a kind of architecture that will kind of encapsulate that space practice, that, get over the Ebbinghaus curve kind of logic that you see in the scientific way of how people learn. So is that a part of Xplor?
It is. And I think one of the ways we're trying to tackle that inevitable curve, though I would love to see a time in our careers, John, where we can shorten that curve just because we're making something that much more profound or an experience that has that much longer of a tail. One of the things we're trying to do is create an experience in which users are seeing Xplor as part of their journey. So that's one of the biggest challenges, right? We come into an LMS, we complete the training we've been assigned, and then we're out on our own. And maybe the content stays with us. The more profound stuff will stick in our mind. And if we've done our job, they might have an opportunity to apply it to a new scenario. Activation material helps. But with Xplor, by connecting content to a skills attainment methodology, we're saying, okay, you've told us you want to get better at these things. We're now going to serve you up and recommend a variety of content that's going to help you on that journey. And the goal is to keep them engaging and to keep them seeing that, hey, skills attainment is not a matter of ticking boxes. It's a matter of my deliberate engagement and interaction with content that I then apply later and come back and validate. So I'm hopeful, but I think the ultimate challenge is the workplace is always going to be one of interference, sometimes chaotic, interjectors into my day. So what I can control, what I can control is once they click into my content, it's an experience they don't want to leave. And we have a world of improvement to do there in this industry, because most of the content we see out there is craptastic.
Love that word. So the last couple of years have been challenging for everyone. But as we look towards the future, what's really exciting you in the learning and talent space?
I am seeing over the past 18 months, I've seen a kind of a reset on what we find valuable as people, as workers, as coworkers, as employees. And I've seen learning come back into the forefront of, hey, wait a minute, we are humans first. And as humans, when our back's against that wall and we don't see opportunities and our company's going through transformation and maybe we've been laid off or furloughed, what do? We learn. We learn how to code. We take courses on the side. We start a side hustle. We expand our minds. That's what we do naturally. And what I'm seeing and what we're seeing with Cornerstone infrastructure, with our 80 million learners, is that they are learning new things, new skills, not even just skills that have to do with their job. And that creates an infinite opportunity for us to say, hey, maybe the workplace is more than just getting better at this thing you do. And maybe it's more about how can we create better people, bigger learning opportunities, to see it as more of a continuum than a one and done. I think there's more work to do, John. And I'm right where I need to be. We're right on the cusp of this big thing. I think Xplor is going to be a huge catalyst for content. But ultimately, I want to create a workplace that is more thoughtful, more deliberate. And I think we can do that through powerful learning strategies.
Looking slightly further out, what do you see that you feel might not be in the current tool set necessarily, but which things like AI and virtual reality are going to bring into it? How do you see that developing?
Yeah, I think XR in general is going to have its day. That's been an area of great interest for me. I started it with skepticism, like everyone else, and then saw it used in new avenues and ways outside of kind of, high intensity, dangerous scenarios, and more of kind of a human skills, people skills outcome. I think XR will take a big role in workplace learning once we can remove the kind of logistical constraint and the barrier to entry, the cost of that, cost of headsets, cost of all that stuff, all the remote updating, all those things that just make it really complex right now. I see that as a huge opportunity. And I see more and more fusion between smart product development that is underpinned by smart learning design. We need more learning practitioners. And I think it's one of the reasons, John, I've built my career kind of out here. I've never wanted to identify a company that I worked my way up over 20 years. I wanted to have that industry view. I've always chosen jobs and chosen opportunities that kind of scared me a little bit and challenged me to learn something new and to try a new skill and then to leverage that into different jobs. And that kind of moving in and out of different industries and different types of roles has given me a perspective of where I think we can take learning to have its rightful seat at the strategic table in organizations.
I suppose something that some people feel will increasingly come to be part of the landscape as we look forwards is, for years and years, and you probably had this experience as well, learning in a way was too small an industry for the big tech giants to bother about. They seem a lot more engaged with it now, and we have kind of the stuff that Microsoft is doing with Viva. We have Facebook inventing Meta, the metaverse, which if the vision comes anything like true, is going to be a new kind of version of the web, new medium that we all have to swim in. So they own that space, and that is the space that people learn in. I mean, you can see that more and more that learners use Google, they use Facebook, TikTok, even whatever to learn. So it's kind of like the invasion of the generics, if you like. In a way, that threat has always been there and never quite happens. Do you think there is going to come a kind of day when Facebook takes over, Facebook and Microsoft and Amazon and whoever else completely own that?
That's a little scary, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to scare you now.
Like, I'm going to swallow that one down. Oh my goodness. I don't think so. And I think it's because at the core of our industry, it is always going to be B to B to C. We build brilliant content and we architect solutions because we understand the magic that happens between to B to C. It is not a direct to consumer experience. It is companies that are architecting their future while bringing along their people. And that is a level of nuance and complexity that is very different than a B2C experience. Sure, I can go to Google and say, how do I fix my broken ice maker in my refrigerator? And I will find 10,000 hits and I'll sort it by number of reviews and I'll get a 2-minute video from some Yahoo, wherever, teaching me how to do it in 2 minutes. But that is very different than the types of things and the weight of things I will need to learn in the workplace. There are repercussions for us not training our managers right or well or consistently. And I think there is a wild difference between things that I need to know how to do and things that will propel me in the right way in my organization and foster the next generation of people that are coming behind me and help my company move forward. So I hope we don't see that invasion of the generics. I think there will always be a place for expert learning practitioners that can smartly borrow some of their principles and bring it into the workplace.
I thought that was a really interesting response about the B to B to C, that three-cornered relationship between the vendor, the client, and the learner. That is something that I've kind of struggled with throughout my career. And I think the industry has struggled with in a way. But in fact, it's the ability to negotiate that successfully that has stopped the kind of has stopped the generics kind of taking over. Because, like you look at a Zuckerberg or an Amazon, what they're about is kind of total ownership, monopoly. So it's that three-cornered thing is not something that you can imagine them really engaging with particularly successfully. I think that's a really interesting idea, actually.
Yeah, that is the thing that's more like wanting me to tear out my hair on any given day. Like, if I could just make content for the end user, that'd be great. But that smart B2B takes a step back and says, well, wait a minute. Yes, I'm building content for the employee, for the end user, but I'm architecting products for that business. And that kind of struggle is what makes it powerful, because it forces us to reckon, how can I help this company move forward while also investing in their people? And that is far more complex than we think it is.
I think you're right. So lastly, what's the best place for people to follow your thought and activities?
So I have never really gotten into Twitter. I feel so bad about that, John. I'm a Gen Xer. It's just not my thing. LinkedIn is probably the best space for me. I tend to post kind of the videos and the other stuff that I'm engaged in. I'll post a link to this too. And I'm going to be proudly telling everyone that I was invited to the Learning Hack. This is awesome.
That's so kind.
Thank you. This has been super fun.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for agreeing to appear and for taking the time today.
My pleasure, John.
That's all on the Learning Hack podcast for this time. Many thanks to Summer and to our sponsors Learning Pool and Cornerstone. The Learning Hack is completely independent and transparently funded by sponsorship. If you want to help others find us, please like, follow, rate, review and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube.
Next week, we have our final release of the year, and it's a humdinger. For the last episode of Great Minds on Learning for this season, Donald and I covered the Enlightenment. But the Learning Hack is over for this year. So from me and all the Hack team, we'd like to wish you just the very best possible festive season you're able to have. See you on the other side.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, learning people.
Now I finally get it.
Merry Christmas.